Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&As, so let's go ahead and get this started. All right, first question. How to strengthen very weak rotator cuff muscles? Does it improve shoulder mobility? Well, here's the question I would ask you. Why do you think you have weak rotator cuff muscles? And because the rotator cuffs are four completely different muscles with completely different functions, there's not a set answer to that, right? There's not a set answer to that. And you're going to laugh at what I tell you. I don't know. How do you strengthen the two biggest rotator cuffs? You mean the infraspinatus and the supraspinatus? Which, by the way, the infraspinatus is a big muscle. It's not like you're thinking this little muscle the size of your pinky finger. It's pretty big. And it runs all the way from almost from your spine all the way up into your shoulder. It's along your back. That's one of the biggest of the four rotator cuffs. So how do you strengthen those? Pull-ups, rows, chin-ups, face pulls, right? Your back exercises. You see where we're going with this? Uh, Bench press strengthens at least one of your rotator cuffs. The bench press. So, I mean, it's like you're asking a question of how do you strengthen your rotator cuffs? I don't know. Try rowing and bench pressing with good form and good technique. That will build and strengthen those muscles. They don't necessarily need individual work. When you start talking about training individual rotator cuff muscles, you're probably doing it for maybe a very sport specific reason or for prehab or rehab reasons for a non-lifter. These muscles should be developed. If you have a balanced strength training program, particularly if you're doing plenty of pulling and stuff for your upper back, these muscles shouldn't be weak. They're going to get strong. I mean, it's impossible to row two plates aside for reps and to bench two plates aside for reps and have weak rotator cuff muscles. It's just not going to happen. Okay? So that's the first thing to think about. Number two, does it improve shoulder mobility? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily at all. Strengthening rotators doesn't guarantee anything about shoulder mobility. Mobility is your strength at the terminal ends of your range of motion. That is what mobility is. All right? So, I mean, realistically, the real question becomes how do we get good shoulder mobility? How do you strengthen your rotator cuffs? Balanced strength training. Good balanced strength training. Do a full range of motion. That's pretty much it. All right, next question. Hey Jason, can someone using large amounts of gear and GH peptides grow just as much muscle with a proper periodized program, or would the traditional bodybuilding row split actually work better for this person? Well, why would you think that those things would work better? Look, a lot of your traditional bro splits are just inferior programming. And what ends up happening is that guys who use that sort of programming oftentimes are so genetically gifted while using such large amounts of these things that how they train, as far as programming goes, doesn't matter that much, right? Your only real concerns for them are recovery, injury rates, things like that. All right, this is where programming matters for people in those situations. As long as they train fairly hard and use a lot of volume, bodybuilders, the guys who are destined to go be pro bodybuilders, are going to be pro bodybuilders because it's drugs and genetics. They're not going to gain better by doing that. They're going to get hurt more often. But it doesn't matter really because it's going to be a short-lived sport for them and they're all going to die young anyway. So it doesn't really matter. It's completely irrelevant if they're beat up or not, I guess. So here's the thing to think about. I'm going to ask you a very, very simple question. If you see really good programming, well-written programming that makes a drug-free lifter get big and strong, right? What do you think happens when anabolics are introduced? Does it just magically stop working? I mean, no, really think about that. Guys ask things like this, And they'll say, well, then why did all these bodybuilders do this? Yeah, but they didn't get any bigger than the guys who used good programming when they went over to these weird splits. But I want to ask you again the simple question: if you see really good programming that gets a natty jacked and strong with a low injury rate, what do you think happens when a bunch of gear and stuff gets introduced? Do you think they just magically don't get real big and strong? No, it just amplifies the effects. And if anything, a program with proper fatigue management and periodization will keep the injury risk lower. It'll keep it lower because that's a real concern, right? Just something to think about. The reason these other traditional bodybuilding setups have been implemented is because how they train just doesn't really matter that much for the growth side at a certain point. Genetic freak on lots of drugs is going to get big no matter what he does. So they just kind of come up with stuff all about feeling the pump or whatever it is that their logic is behind stuff. All right, next question, last question of the week. What's your opinion on dropping the weight after you complete a deadlift? Well, ironically, what do you see me doing in the background there? With a 605-pound training max, held it at the top, and set it down slightly controlled, but what do you see me do on my rep work? What do you see me do on my rep work? You see me control the eccentrics. Right? I don't drop it. I don't do them slow, but they're controlled. So I understand the concept. A lot of guys are like, well, I can just pull because it's just about building the concentric strength, right? Because it's a concentric based exercise. But the eccentric still matters. Here's why. Okay. We're either deadlifting to get bigger and stronger, right? Or we're deadlifting for powerlifting meets. At a powerlifting meet, you can't turn loose at the top. You have to be able to hold onto that bar and lower it. Right? So you better train that way. At least like what I did in the video there. You better at least be able to do that. What about hypertrophy? What about your grip training? I mean, if you really want to get the most out of your volume deadlifting, assuming you're not pulling maxes and really heavy singles, let's say you're actually doing work with a deadlift. Well, don't you think you're going to build a little more muscle if you do have some eccentric control? Given the nature of their exercises that are intended to be explosive, the deadlift isn't really explosive, though. It can be. I mean, people are like, you pull pretty fast sometimes. Yeah, but it's not a true explosive exercise unless we're doing speed work. So, like a Pendlay row or whatever is different. You may not control the eccentric as much. But a deadlift, we have the ability to. Why not control it a little bit? It'll be better for your hypertrophy. That should be better for building your low back, and then your grip. Your grip is going to get a lot stronger quicker from it. So no, I'm not a big fan of dropping deadlifts. You don't usually see me do it unless I'm excited or something. I think you should have some control on the eccentric. It doesn't need to be a 4-second eccentric or anything stupid. But yeah, you should control it. You don't just drop it. My opinion. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.